Welcome back here with Money, Money, Money. And this week we are talking about higher education and how you can plan smartly for it and fund it in the right manner. So, Mr. Rungta, then continuing with our conversation, the question is that if you are looking at least partially utilizing some money that you've saved up, which instrument is it all right to break or redeem? You know, fixed deposits, mutual funds, debt mutual funds versus equity mutual funds. Where do you take out the money from?
So typically, I think since the requirement is going to be immediate, you first break your debt because equity is meant for the long term. So, I mean, typically you would break debt first. And I mean, break your FDs first because those are the lowest yielding debt.
And highest taxed.
And so that's the reason they are lowest yielding because of the high tax. So do that first. Okay. The advantage of debt mutual funds is that you can really save on tax by gifting them to your major child.
Okay, how does that work?
So you gift instead of you redeeming and using that money, effectively gifting the money to the child to pay the fees, instead of doing that, gift the units to the child.
Okay.
There is once you gift the units to the child, the capital gains tax will now be charged to the child.
Okay.
And since the child, assuming it's a major, the child is a major, may not have any other income, and therefore the long-term capital gains will get the benefit of the 2.5 lakh deduction. Okay. Over and above the fact that it is such a low rate, 2.5 lakhs out of the long-term capital gains tax would be free.
So how does the gifting process work? I mean, is it as simple as simply opening a demat account for the child and transferring shares? And you mentioned as long as the child is a major.
Right.
So what are the differences there between minor and major?
If the child is not a major, then any income in the child's hand is going to be taxed in your hand. So it makes no sense.
Pointless then,
Only if the child is 18 and above, at any time during the year, I think then that is fine. Procedure is a little bit complicated or easy. You have to open a demat account in the name of the child. Okay. If you're not holding the units in a dematerialized form, you have to get them dematerialized. Okay. It's a process that takes 5 to 7 days. Okay. You dematerialize them. Once they're dematerialized, transfer it to the demat account of the child. Okay. Okay. And then the child can redeem it in the normal way. Okay. And by that, you can save a fair amount of tax.
That sounds an excellent sort of tip to keep in mind. You know, finally, coming down to questions for parents who would be in the planning stage now. Parents whose children are in class 9 or 10, for instance. They know that 3-4 years down the line, there is a big requirement that's going to come up. What's your advice? There are lots of products in the market. There are, child plans, so-called child plans being sold by insurance companies. Do they make any sense to you at all?
So 3 things I would like to point out. First, I think in mixing insurance investments make absolutely no sense. That applies in the context of children's education as it applies in the context of retirement. The second thing, which is very critical in terms of children's education, is that if you're planning for your child's higher education, parents say, I want a dollar investment so that I can hedge against the dollar. Okay. Earlier on in the program, we spoke about that the dollar costs in rupee terms would typically go up 10.5–11%. Yeah. Now tell me, or 7% in dollar terms.
7% in terms of just the cost of education, 3–4% currency. So net effect, 10 to 11% is your inflation, education inflation for, let's say, US education.
For US. If I was to invest in dollars, is it easier to get a 7% return in dollars versus getting an 11% return in rupees? In both cases, to get that kind of return, you would have to choose equity. Okay, you cannot get a 7% dollar return or an 11% rupee return without having an equity component. But which one is easier, 7% dollar or 11% rupee? I think the answer is very obvious. It's much easier to get it in rupees than to get it in dollars. So one of the things that parents should think of is that you don't necessarily have to invest in dollars to be able to pay dollars. So I think that is the second thing that they should keep in mind. Third is start early. I mean, don't wait for 3–4 years to be left. I mean, you should be starting this when your child is born. Right. It's not too late today. I mean, don't wait till your child And you don't have to know what your child is going to do. You plan.
Yeah.
If he does a course like me, becomes a chartered accountant, that doesn't cost anything much, right? He's not going to blame you.
Then you're a lucky parent.
Yes. But he's not going to blame you that you saved for me.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So I think it is better to plan in advance.
Well, it's advice that can definitely be put to good use. Thank you so much, Mr. Rungta, for coming on the show and demystifying a lot of those queries for us. Well, that's it on this week's edition of Money, Money, Money. Your feedback, comments, queries, welcome as always. We'll see you again next week.